all kinds of crazy things, not everything, but all kinds of crazy things that we can imagine could or will become real.
Well, that's why I'm so fascinated with the speed part of this, because it's sort of like, well, somewhere, maybe in China, but somewhere there's going to be an island of Dr. Moreau sort of thing, where just some scientist who doesn't, who just wants to do whatever he can with, and, let the consequences be damned, will go ahead and do it. And it won't, for years that could exist and no one will know. And then, the more responsible scientists will constantly be playing catch up. And then that also sort of brings me to the law part of this, because we are starting sort of to discuss laws around this here a little bit, barely. I mean, I remember when George W. Bush was sort of talking about some of this related to stem cells and that sort of thing. But how much of this do you think will come down to just what countries will sort of allow it more versus what scientists are just going to do what they want to do? And
it's a great question. It's an essential question, and that's the race, because the science is moving forward exponentially. You're exactly right. It was not a surprise that the first, I write about this in the book, that the first application of using CRISPR gene editing on humans happened in China. I'd always said that's where it's going to happen. It's not a surprise that now it's in Russia, that there's a biologist there who's saying he has 5 people lined up to have more genetically engineered babies. And this happens, all of this technology exists within the context of our societies. And so there are some societies that are better regulated in these areas. I always hold up the United Kingdom as kind of the gold standard. They have a national healthcare system, which makes it much more much easier to just spread rationality in the system, where we in the U.S. we have this kind of this chaotic system of systems.
Is the part of the problem, and my audience knows I'm not a big regulation guy, so is part of the problem though that even if you have regulation, well done, well-intentioned, all of that, that in a way that will slow down certain advancements where then the bad guys, let's say, or the kooky scientists who don't have those ethical dilemmas will just keep making jumps in a faster way.
True, but we don't, it's not like regulation is good or bad. We need the right amount of regulation to incentivize the outcomes that we want, and especially in an area like this where we're talking about the future of human life. You talked about where does life begin at conception, which is a very legitimate issue. A lot of people feel emotional about it. And the people who are saying life begins at conception, they're not saying life begins at conception, but let's have no regulations and life begins at conception for me. They're saying, well, we need to have a regulatory system by law so to determine what people can and can't do. And I may disagree with some of the goals that they're setting, but I think we're all agreeing that this is life and it has to be regulated. And we don't want scientists out there just experimenting on humans, which is what happened in China.
Right. And well, so I'm saying I'm with you on that, but that we can't regulate all countries.
So for ourselves, what we need to do, like if any society decides that, oh, we're just going to opt out of this technology, like opting out of the genetics revolution is opting out of national competitiveness in the 21st century. Like if you do it, you can do it, but you are just going to be, like you're not going to have a competitive economy because this is the future.
You're going to be like when we find those random tribes somewhere.
Yeah, which is great, and they're probably happier than we are. They're getting more. They're working out. They're getting more steps a day.
That's a whole other topic. Yeah.
So what we need to do is we need to find that balance within our societies. And it's good to have that balance because, like with the United Kingdom, they're very well regulated. They have cutting-edge science, but the public is on board with the science. And so we, in the United States, we have incredible science. We have the best basic science in the world. But there's this total mismatch between the science that's racing forward and the general public, which is kind of afraid and is cautious.
That's why we're doing this,
Exactly. Man. No, I know. And so we need to find a way of bringing those people together. I mean, I'm going to do an interview on Newt Gingrich's radio show, and I'm so committed to engaging with religious communities, evangelical communities, conservative communities, because it's like, wouldn't it be terrible to say, oh, like, oh no, this is my truth, that's your truth. We can't even talk to each other. That's the foundation of society. But you're absolutely right. There are some places that are going to be, that already are, less regulated, or maybe well regulated based on a different set of values. You can imagine a place like North Korea. They say, well, we the leaders we want to stay in power forever. And so we'd like to engineer certain outcomes that will have a Plato's Republic model, or have the leaders, and then we'll have the followers, and we'll select their embryos, or maybe even do some basic gene editing to determine certain outcomes. And so there's a race. And there's a race between societies, but there's also a race to see, can we build some kind of normative global system that can at least bring us all together with a process. And there's a lot of examples of failure, but there's some examples, whether it's nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, even climate change, where we've not succeeded, but we've done certainly better than worse. And we talked about telling stories. I mean, international law is a story. The concept of human rights is a story. And we've sold those stories pretty well, and that's what we need to do. And that's why we need to work on the individual level. Everyone needs to be educated. On the national level, we need smart laws, and we need political leaders who are engaged on this issue, which is hardly the case now. And on an international system, where we need to move towards having processes that can bring us together and over time develop norms and regulations and laws. Okay,
so we sort of understand the inequity, let's say, between the way certain nations are going to deal with this and the way certain individual scientists are going to deal with this. Let's jump into that religious portion of it for a moment. So I'm glad you're going to go talk to Newt Gingrich. I've got him coming on in the fall.
Oh, good.
And look, it's interesting to talk to a Republican who I think, basically, I think, has a pretty decent understanding of science, but comes from a religious perspective as well. Okay, that's fine.
It's more than interesting. It's essential. Like, what are we going to do? Not talk to each other?
So when you talk to Newt, or even not to make it so specifically about Newt, but when you talk to people of faith, I think the first roadblock you're going to come against is they're just going to say you're playing God. I mean, I'm sure you hear this all the time. So how do you counter that, or how do you assuage their fears?
So the first thing is acknowledging. It's like, I get that fear. I share that fear. I mean, whether it's playing God or messing with complex systems that we don't fully understand. I mean, this is a hubristic act. We are just one little species in a world of many millions of species. Like, who says that we are the ones who get to recreate life? And so I get it. But if you believe that it is okay for humans to apply technology to change our environments, the question isn't should we or shouldn't we, because that's what we do. That's why we're here. That's what medicine is. That's what agriculture is. I mean, we live in a world that we have transformed through our technology. The question is, what are the uses of that technology that we're comfortable with? And I get that this issue of abortion is very difficult. It's very painful for people. And I'm not a proponent of abortion. I just feel that a woman should have the right, within limits, to dictate what happens to her own body. I don't think the state basically can enforce slavery on women to force them to carry children on behalf of the state, which is essentially what it would be. But like, even with the people who are the quote unquote pro-life people, in the context of the debates that we just had in Alabama, there were people who were leading that, people in the state Senate in Alabama. They very consciously decided to leave IVF out of that legislation. So if you believe that life begins at conception, when that sperm fertilizes the egg, that is life, and that's inviolable, you would say, well, we should include IVF in this ban. They're not doing it because in every community, when you see these parents, whether they're high-risk parents or older parents or soon just normal parents, who are having children through IVF, it's the miracle of life. And so the quote from one of the Alabama senators, well, this doesn't apply to those fertilized eggs in a dish. We're talking about embryos inside of a woman's body.
So that's a real disconnect there.
You could call it a disconnect, but I'm not calling it a disconnect. I'm saying it's a recognition that this stuff is really complicated. And if we just say, I have this absolute position, and I'm just going to stick to it, I think that's going to, like, I want to look to say, all right, well, you have recognized that because you are pro-life, you recognize that you want to protect embryos, and we may have political differences, but I respect yours. And you want to protect the miracle of life, of these people in your communities who are having kids through IVF that they otherwise wouldn't have. And so I just think we have to work towards finding some kind of, are we ever going to completely agree? No, but that's not a standard in a democracy. It's not that you have to agree on everything. It's that how do we rebuild a place where we can at least communicate with each other and try to find as much common ground as possible.
So there's so many ways I could go with this, and I have a zillion sci-fi movies rattling in my head.
Yes.
Suddenly I had something about Star Wars in there related to basically a clone army. We'd start having this genetically modified group of humans versus, we haven't even got into robotics at all here, but AI and droids, and they're going to sort of be rising. But let me hold that one for just a sec. What about the economic portion of this, which is that once these technologies become more ubiquitous and more people can afford them, and then they're just sort of out there and somewhat mainstream, that obviously, like every other technology, like a flat screen television, people that have the means will start using them, and that basically we're going to sort of have two paths for humans. There'll be sort of these superhumans who will be able to deal with all of these things and take advantage of these technologies, and then you'll have the regular old suckers like us right now that can't do it, and that what we're going to do with that, how we're going to sort of bridge that divide.
It's a really essential question. I have a few different ways of answering it. One is that's one possibility, and if we let that happen, shame on us, because the technology isn't requiring that outcome. It's the way we have decided to organize ourselves. So in a country like Israel, where IVF is included in the national health plan, you don't have these equity issues because everybody has access. And if you have a system where you're doing that, it actually would pay for itself, because we're going to be able to prevent huge numbers of genetic diseases that are costing us many, many hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's an organizational issue. I always say that if people are worried about genetic inequality in the future, as we should be, we can wait until the future comes to say, like, aha, this is what I was preaching. Or you can look at the world today and say, geez, there's so much inequality today. Average kid born in the Central African Republic is born essentially brain damaged because of maternal malnutrition in the context of the Civil War. And so there's no difference in terms of outcome between a genetically enhanced person and me, or my kids, and a kid born in the Central African Republic. There's still that same differential. But if we're okay with that today, if we're not living those values today, how can we say, oh, but in the future, we want to live those values when we are the people in the Central African Republic? And then the second point I'll quickly make is we all have these superpowers that once seemed like magic. So we're all hopefully immunized, or most of us are immunized.
Not so much anymore.
But it's like a superpower.
Yeah.
And it's a superpower that everybody has. So there's also a cost issue with this.
Okay, so basically, that's the political element to this. That's just sort of the. So what do you do? I mean, how do you get politicians to get on board things that are such big ideas that, politicians, when they talk about anything now, we've been dumbed down to the point where it's like, you're going to mention CRISPR and it's going to make sense to anybody. Like, how do you actually get the political elite to be able to deal with this in an honest way?
The honest answer is I don't know, but I'm trying. And so here are the things that at least I'm trying to do. One is I'm trying to help people get educated, and so with this book I've written, it's really at a level that anybody can understand, and I want to just bring people into like, once you have basic information, we're all equals because we're all humans and everyone has a say. Two, where I'm doing a lot of outreach to political leaders. We've offered the copies of the ebook for free to any member of parliament of any country in the whole world. Talking with actually Brad Sherman, who's a congressman from Los Angeles, and others about congressional hearings. In the paperback version of Hacking Darwin, which is coming out in April, we're going to have a short political guide in the end with some pointers about questions to ask for your political leaders. And I'm doing this work in Geneva, but all of that amounts to nothing, in the sense that what we need is an explosion. Like everybody, we need, on a popular level, people need to be seized with issues, kind of like it's happened with climate change. I mean, climate change 10 years ago was a non-issue. And now, people are, whether it's not using plastic straws or marching, or people get that this is an issue. People get that they want to have their voices heard. We need to have that happen with issues of genetics, and that will at least begin to put this on the radar of political leaders. But then we need to educate political leaders. Like, we need to have outreach, and this is, I talk about this in the book. Every movement has to start somewhere, and it has to start from this little hopeless place where like there's this huge problem, and there's just a few people. But if we need, it's a political issue, and the challenge is, 10 years from now, this is going to be the biggest issue in the world. Everyone's going to be talking about it. There are going to be people marching. I think there's a potential of violence, because the people who are, if you're worried about genetically modified crops now, how are you going to feel about genetically modified humans? So, but why wait 10 years until this is like an exploding crisis? To have a conversation about what are the things that we should be doing now, because big decisions are being made every day.
Yeah, so when you talk about genetically modified humans, I'll go to one of the sci-fi movies. Did you ever see The Island? I can't believe I'm going to quote a Michael Bay movie here. But it's I think maybe it was a Philip K. Dick story.
Right.
But basically the idea being that these sort of rich elite people could clone themselves, and so that if at any point they got into a car accident or had a disease, that they basically had all the parts available, and then of course what happens is the clones believe that they're human, and then that's what the debate comes about. But all that's not that far from what could become reality, right?
As a science fiction writer, and recognize that we live in this world of exponential change, where our sense of the speed of change is too conservative, because we understand it just because of the way our brains function by looking backwards. Whereas change is happening going forwards, is going to be a lot faster. All kinds of crazy things, not everything, but all kinds of crazy things that we can imagine could or will become real. And so there are a lot of different scenarios. Certainly, human biology is extremely complex. And so it's going to take us a long time to understand more of this incredible complexity, but the complexity of our biology has been roughly consistent for millions of years. But the sophistication of our tools is on a J-curve. And so we are going to be using big data analytics and all of these other incredibly powerful tools to understand ourselves. And we're going to be able to look under the hood of what it means to be human. There will still be this wonderful mystery, but we're going to know a lot more. And we're going to have to figure out how to use that knowledge in ways that doesn't undermine our humanity, but makes us individually and collectively better.
That could be the ending, but I want to go a little bit more here.
Go.
So going back to what I mentioned before, this sort of somewhat silly Star Wars thing, but this idea of clones, that we can genetically modify their conditions and all of these things, and now you have AI growing. Is there sort of a split within the futurist community of what people think is maybe one is more the future than the other, or something like that?
There are some people who are that it's genetically engineered humans, and there's some it's going to be AI. And in my very, very strong view, it can't be one or the other. It's humans plus AI. Gary Kasparov writes about this. And that is the thing, because we are, humans are incredible. Our brain is so unbelievably, almost magically sophisticated. All of the things that it can do are just so way beyond the possibility, even of our most advanced AIs. And so we need to find ways that we'll work together. The genetics revolution is the AI revolution. There would be no way that without our AI and big data analytics that we could even begin to decode the incredible complexity of our biology. So the two really need to work together. And that will be the story of the 21st century, is to figure out, well, what do humans do that machines can't do? And what do machines do that humans can't do or just are better at it than humans. And how do we pull those capabilities together? And then with these massively powerful capabilities, how do we try to build some guardrails to make sure that our technology is used to advance our best values rather than undermine them?
Okay, so we'll end on this. I'll give you the scariest question I possibly could, which is 20 years from now, if the 98% that you usually focus on, the good stuff at the talks, if that really works, paint me what that future looks like, and then we'll go to the other future.
Sure. So that one is we're going to be living longer, we're going to be living healthier, we're going to have all kinds of information about future risks and potentials, and we're going to use that in a positive way to inform our lives. If we have risks down the line, we're going to be working to minimize those risks. We're going to change the way that we make babies. We're going to increasingly move from conception through sex to conception through IVF, followed by embryo screening. Right now in the US, we have about 2% of kids are born through IVF. In Japan, it's 5%. In Norway and Denmark, it's 10%. Those numbers are always going to go up until we see procreation by sex as something that is not natural.
And then we're also going to be, I can't believe I didn't even mention this whole time, we're also going to be then growing humans in labs too.
You know, that's a debate now. So there's this whole movement for artificial wombs. There's a lot that happens emotionally and biologically between a mother and a baby, but certainly it's working for sheep. And so basically the core point is that biology is at play. We have this sense that, I know what biology is because I'm a human and my parents were humans. But a lot of these things are just at play. I mean, we were single-cell organisms, and now we're this, and we're going to be something else. And that something else will be impacted by our technology, just like our digestive system has been guided by fire. Like it allows us to digest things that otherwise we couldn't. And so we are, like, that is where we're going. And just this 20-year story, so we're going to be better healthcare, moving away from sex, from conception through sex. And we're going to begin selecting future children based on health outcomes and other information about traits.
Now give me the 2%. We screw this thing up. What are we looking at?
We are attacking each other. That there's a level of social cohesion that is required for this technology to advance in ways that benefit everybody. I mean, one of the reasons why we're having so many problems here in the United States is that we had this economic change. So we had this change in basically the role of capital in society. So capital was overvalued and labor was undervalued. We allowed this small group of people to amass just a disproportionate and inappropriate amount of power. And then everybody else, maybe they couldn't articulate all the reasons, they just had this feeling, hey, I'm getting screwed over, and I'm going to fight back. And so if this powerful technology, if we don't handle it in a responsible way, we're going to be at each other's throats. We're going to have elites who are saying, screw this, like my mission in life is to create advantages and confer advantages to my children. I have more in common with people who are wanting to do that in other countries all around the world than I do with these other people in my country who are just there's a pain in my ass, and they're demanding things and they're fighting against things that I want. So I'm just leaving. I mean,
so basically they're going to have to build Elysium or something like that.
Or something, or just have an island, do it in the Caribbean or whatever. So if we're not careful, these technologies could destroy our societies. And that's why, I mean, this is a conversation, it's teed up by science, but it's the core pillar is values. I mean, that's what this is all about.
I would love to continue this.
Yes.
We got to wrap, but as you may know, I go off the grid for August. So we're taping this right now at the end of July.
Right.
And I'm disappearing. No technology, no phone, nothing electronic. So you've teed me up for so much good stuff to think about while I'm gone.
And where are you going? I hope you...
I'm not telling people,
good,
but I'm disappearing, and there will be nothing electronic.
And it's so important, because we're talking about this technology, and technology, it does so many wonderful things. But at the core, if we lose the essence of what it just means to be a human, just out in the mountains, it's like that's everything.
Yeah. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you'll come back to get you back in the prediction game.
I would love it. As a matter of fact, I'll come back. The paperback version of Hacking Darwin is coming out in April of next year, and so I'd love to come back when that happens.
Done and done. All right, thank you very much. And for more on Jamie, you can follow him on Twitter at Jamie Metzl. And if you enjoy conversations like these, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so that you actually get notified of the videos. Thanks for watching.